Story 1. Corporate greed is damaging many aspects of society, including the American dream, the environment, the entertainment industry, and democracy. Story 2. I do not get it. What is the American dream even about? I agree that corporate greed is harming not just the United States but many other countries as well. Story 3. Yes, it is directly responsible for killing the American dream, but I also blame the government for allowing it to get this bad because they pay them to. Story 4. Obviously, yes. 80 years ago, a chief executive officer making $70,000 while his lowest paid employees made $4,000 would be considered greedy. A 17.5 times multiplier. General Motors chief executive officer, there are people with much greater multipliers, but it makes more sense to compare a business that makes physical goods and could actually operate 80 years ago, made $29.5 million last year, while the average worker made $67,000. That is a 440 times multiplier. At least that business provides a product that has value. Look at price-to-earnings firms that literally just destroy companies, sell off the pieces, or pump current revenues to resell at the cost of substantially shortening the company's long-term viability. Literally useless to the world, just creating money with no tangible service or good. The world is in trouble if this is not brought under control. If someone works hard enough and gets lucky, I have no problem with them being worth, let's say, $30 million, enough money to do whatever they want within reason even if they never work again. But billionaires that can afford private militias and small countries if they wanted to? That is absurd. Story 5. No, the American dream was a classist lie to begin with. Most people work hard. Coal miners work hard. No one but the mine owner and their investors ever got rich through mining. What has changed is the dynamics of who is included and who is excluded from the in-groups, and the initial capital investment needed to be a business owner. To give you an example, in my small town in rural Michigan, it costs $500,000 just to buy an abandoned business lot, not to mention fixing up the place or changing its business model. So, you need to be close to a millionaire to start unless you plan to rent or incur debt against yourself. Story 6. The American Dream. You cannot kill something that has been dead for decades. The American dream is gone. There is no dream, no justice, and no freedom in America. The faster you learn this, there is also no education for 99.9% of you, the faster you can try to get your life together. Story 7. Corporate greed is a feature of capitalism, motivating corporations to maximize profits, even if it involves unethical decisions. Story 8. To be frank, the American dream is an ideal. If you ever meet people who did the spouse, house, car, 2 kids thing, you will find that they are not any happier than anyone who did not acquire those things. The country is based on ownership and consumerism. There are better dreams than that, certainly. Story 9. I think private equity is harming productive companies and corporations that could otherwise continue to produce useful products, support workers, and contribute to the economy and the greater good. Story 10. Corporate greed has been around for a long time and is part of the reason for killing the American dream. However, lifestyles promoted by today's media create the illusion that we deserve to have what we want immediately. New cars, the latest clothes, dining out several times a week, extravagant vacations, a nice house, and more. The dream was not handed to us on a platter. It was a step-by-step process. Now we are fortunate to be living it as retirees. Below is how it came to be. First home, 1979, had a 16.9% mortgage rate. It was not easy. Refinanced to 8.9% when rates came down. Sorted expenditures into needs and wants, skipping many wants. Recorded every nickel earned and spent in a budget. No gas station stops for beverages or fast food, except for long-distance travel. Packed lunches and leftovers, which are great. Did not buy a new home every 5 years, as was the trend in the 70s and 80s. Best car deal is the vehicle that is paid for. 1996 Chevrolet Express, 2005 Mustang convertible, 2013 Chevrolet Impala. Took care of belongings so they last longer. Followed the October 10th 80 rule. Save 10%, donate 10% to charity, and live on 80%. Open school accounts for children at birth. We used a gift-to-minors account. adding $50 per month to each until the account reached $5,000, 1980s values. This was not easy on one salary. Used a good broker. By 18, funds paid for schooling with some left over to start individual retirement accounts. Selected affordable post-high school education. Second and third tier schools worked well too. Vacationed wisely. Just purchased round-trip airline tickets to Seattle for June 2026 at $65 in comfort class. Practiced conservative gift giving. At Christmas, each child received 3 gifts, representing the 3 wise men. The youngest opened the first gift, then the next child, and so on until everyone had opened one. Then the cycle repeated. They enjoyed their gifts while waiting to open the next one. Probably should add that my spouse worked a 12-hour day and sometimes on weekends. I usually had a few hours on Sunday night to rest before returning to work. For us, sacrifice on the front end equals freedom at the end. Story 11. The dream is still about a nice car, a house, and 2 or 3 kids, but these things become targets without a basic sense of security. Money is security. Companies do not want to pay living wages that would make us very secure. With living wages, we could fully enjoy our homes, families, friends, and lives without worrying unduly about the future. Freedom is the ability to live where I want without being bothered. We are completely being bothered by companies and politics. Story 12. The American dream is already dead. Corporate greed is one of the many factors destroying their country and possibly the world. Story 13. It's killing everything little by little. You just don't notice it as much day to day. Companies today act as if they are not successful unless they capture every penny in the world, and the fixation on endlessly growing profits makes everything else suffer. Story 14. It is just greed in general. We are all greedy. We want SUVs that are more harmful to the environment. We want the newest phones, trends, clothes, and more. Story 15. I feel like every element of our society is engineered to extract as much wealth from me as possible. Products are not sold at cost plus a percentage for profit. They are priced to maximize revenue regardless of production costs. Story 16. Yes to corporate greed, but also racism, sexism, intolerance, fear, lack of education, and community breakdown are killing the American dream. In the United States this past election, we had an unprecedented opportunity to vote for progress and affirmation of the continuing American dream. Kamala Harris is a first-generation American raised by a single mother who came here on a work visa. Obviously, she is also female and not white, which shows how America is changing. A lot of people, mainly those with power and resources, do not want change. These people have all the advantages now, and they are extremely selfish, so why would they want change? I think Barack Obama being elected and Kamala Harris as vice president scared the traditional power holders. Then they run fear-mongering campaigns and people vote against change and the American dream because they are ignorant, racist, sexist, and easily manipulated. The United States government has been rounding up immigrants en masse without any real judicial oversight. This is the opposite of the American dream. People still come here hoping for a better life where they can work hard, get an education, and raise a family without being harassed by gangs or authoritarian governments. If all this extrajudicial behavior keeps happening, people will eventually not want to come here. That is going to be very bad for this country. Donald Trump will not be alive to see the long-reaching effects of his policies. Same for most people in Congress. Honestly, I do not understand how this is being allowed to happen. We are allowing the baby boomer generation to damage our future even though they will be gone. I believe in the American dream and will fight for it if necessary. Story 17. American dream? No, it destroys everything. Our mental health, our environment, and the environment of many other species. They do it by convincing us that we need all of it, that we need all this stuff, which in fact we do not. They convince governments to build a world around this stuff to the point where we are forced to need it. So they massively extract, exploit, and destroy everything that can provide resources to sell as much of their stuff as possible. Yes, often they push civilization forward, but quite often in directions we do not really need to be pushed, or in directions we should not. Story 18. As a complete outsider, this seems pretty obvious how and why. The American dream is all about becoming wealthy or, in a modern sense, joining the upper middle class. That is what people in other countries find attractive about your country. All the other dream aspects, like fulfilling your potential, getting an education, doing a job you like, and owning things, are just components of that. Corporations, oligarchs, and all forms of totalitarian power, from strongman dictators to faceless parties and military juntas, are all about keeping the population poor and locked in. For example, consider collective farms in the Soviet Union or the diocesan system in ancient Rome, thousands of years apart, but the same idea. The American dream has never been easy, and there is a lot of resistance to reaching the upper middle class lifestyle. However, in totalitarian countries, it was simply impossible and still is. Increasing domestic corporate power is incompatible with the dream because the only way to achieve it is in a free market. A nationalistic, conservative United States where there is a monopoly on everything would be just a typical country, no different from everywhere else. So, no dream. Story 19. It is not just corporate greed that is the problem. It is individual greed. Individual greed drives corporations to act as they do, and it also prevents us from stopping them or holding them in check. The general public, especially those who are poor or middle class, continue to vote for leaders who do not restrain greedy chief executive officers because they either want to keep a few extra pennies at tax time or they believe they will become wealthy someday. If the problem were only executives, we could pass laws to hold them accountable. However, too many people vote against their own interests. Story 20. The entire news, entertainment, and television establishment promoted the idea that greed is good in various ways by idolizing the wealthy, showcasing their greed as positive, and creating a wealth worship culture. This culture started in the mid to late 1980s and has persisted for decades, despite most people never experiencing wealth close to what is shown in movies and television. Story 21. The American dream has been dead for a long time, at least since inflation made owning a home and having a family require two incomes. Story 22. It's over. Oh, say goodbye to the American dream. Say goodbye. Story 23. The American dream is a fairy tale, and it always has been. The wealthy can exploit the dreamers who believe that lie because if you think all that stands between you and them is working harder, you will work harder for less and never question why. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do not think about how the economics of that situation works. Story 24. I believe the problem is much more fundamental than corporate greed. While I believe the premise of the question is correct, I also think that is just part of a whole. You see, money itself is the problem. Do not get me wrong, the concept of money has had a good 7,000-year run. It served us well. But today, it creates more social problems than it solves. Today is very different than the past 7,000 years. Today, we are technically capable of producing an abundance of nearly everything one needs to live comfortably in a modern society. But money, the very concept of it, cannot work in the presence of abundance. While you will never hear this from a college professor, one of the functions of money is that it must create scarcity to function at all. Once you have created an abundance of anything for everyone, the value of it drops to zero, or so low that nobody can profit from its sale. When that happens, everyone quits producing it. This eventually snatches scarcity out of the jaws of abundance. Only once scarcity is reestablished can the value rise. It becomes profitable again, and people are motivated to produce it again. So, the use of money itself cannot abide abundance. It must have scarcity to function. In real-world effect, this is why we will never solve world hunger, poverty, or homelessness. This is why garbage piles up worldwide while we have the technology to recycle well over 94% of all refuse. Worldwide recycling rates are currently about 7% and declining because profitability is declining. Meanwhile, we continue to strip the earth of all the easily mined or harvested resources. Imagine if 90% of our basic resource needs were met by recycling instead of less than 5%. We have the technology to feed all 8 billion people with the caloric intake of the average Western European using only the landmass equal to the state of Illinois. We have technologies sitting on the shelf that would end global climate change, as well as clean and restore the oceans. Not to mention, the overwhelming majority of crimes are motivated by money. Eliminate the use of money, and you have eliminated the motive behind that vast majority of crime. The problem, as I see it, is that we humans are so enamored with money that we would rather live with all these social problems than give it up. We are like the monkey hitting that lever for ever more cocaine money instead of the food lever. Story 25. That died in 2008, son. Wall Street killed that, but I guess you could call it corporate greed just the same. Story 26. The American dream is an advertising pitch for middle-class white men that never applied to anyone else. Story 27. I'm not that old, but I remember a time when a decent job would allow you to own your own home, a new or decently used car, and still have money left over to go out to dinner and take a vacation. The rich were well off, but not in an unobtainable way. Nobody really cared because, sure, they had nice houses, cars, and extravagant vacations, but the middle class had their hobbies as well. One neighbor had a boat, another would go camping, and the guy down the block had a nice sports car. The middle class wouldn't have everything, but they would have something. Now the rich have more money than they could ever spend in a lifetime. They have multiple multimillion-dollar mansions while the average American is 2 steps away from being homeless. They have garages full of new $60,000 plus cars while the average car is over 13 years old. They take once-in-a-lifetime vacations multiple times a year while most working-class Americans have to use their paid time off for things like doctor's appointments, if they are lucky enough to have health insurance. Because of this imbalance, producers are starting to ignore the average American and specifically target the upper middle and wealthy classes. Gone are the $10,000 sedans, replaced with $50,000 plus base model SUVs that would be considered fully loaded in the 90s. Houses are bigger and more expensive. Any apartments being built are luxury with price tags to match. Insurance is up. Taxes are up. Media corporations continue to push more and more advertisements. The rich are running out of things to buy, so they are buying politicians. The only way the American dream can come back is if we rebalance the scales. The 1% cannot control the majority of the wealth in a healthy economy. Story 28. Only to the extent that they have been allowed by the government. I honestly do not blame corporations for pursuing profit at all costs. It is our job to put up the guardrails about what is and is not acceptable. The American dream killed itself through the glorification of wealth as inherently moral. Story 29. Corporate greed ended that long ago. If it ever existed, it was not propaganda created to give poor people a glimmer of hope for a better future. Story 30. No, greed is good. There are dozens of greedy people within a few miles of my home who want to provide me with food in exchange for money tonight. Greedy people run Reddit. Greedy people are the reason that the collected knowledge of the human race is accessible from a device I carry in my pocket. What killed the American dream is United States government monetary policy. Story 31. Yes. Here are a few points. Food companies often save money by adding preservatives and harsh chemicals to extend shelf life. These chemicals are toxins and can cause both short-term and long-term health problems. Food companies also use dyes to make their products look fresher and more appealing. These dyes are derived from petroleum, labeled as food-grade petroleum, but consuming petroleum-based substances can lead to neurological issues. There are many more examples, but this issue, along with concerns about real estate and clothing industries, is frustrating. Story 32. What does corporate greed mean? When you invest your money, do you not want the highest return on your investment? When you switch jobs, do you not select the highest paying job? A corporation is not some otherworldly creature. It is simply a collection of investors. When I say investors, I do not mean only billionaires. I mean many average people who are invested in mutual funds or exchange-traded funds through their retirement accounts. What you call corporate greed is simply the collection of choices made by everyone in this mix. Story 33. I think human greed and corporate greed are the same. Billionaires are changing the landscape to benefit only themselves. Story 34. Bernie Sanders famously said, "You can't have it all." But the wealthiest among us, including corporations, do not believe him. The fact is, every day our wealth is being concentrated into the hands of fewer individuals and corporations to such an extent that even emperors and kings in ancient times would be shocked to see it. We are left to wonder what will happen when they actually do manage to have it all. Where does it leave the rest of us if the richest 1% control all of our wealth? Will we be seen as their pets or something else? Story 35. It is not corporate greed. It is a society conditioned to value money and wealth above all things, including other humans and the only viable planet. The generation of profits now controls corporate mental health. Story 36. No, the American dream never promised you would become rich working minimum wage. It is still very much alive if you are remotely competent. Story 37. The American dream has always been a lie. It is a lie the upper class sells to the lower class to keep us working hard for low wages. Private property is theft. The state is oppression. The land belongs to all people, and the earth is rich enough to provide for everyone without the need for money. There is no need for us to compete because scarcity is a lie. Story 38. They put hard times on the American dream. Hard times are when the textile workers are out of work. Hard times are when a man has been working the same job for 30 years. They give him a watch, kick him in the butt, and say, "A computer took your job." That's hard times. Story 39. No, I believe innovation changes corporate greed. As long as we create challenges in technology, profits for these companies will continue to grow. The American dream was to have a family, a career, and a house. We live in a completely new world now. Jobs that existed 40 years ago can now be done on a device that fits in your pocket. Tasks that required thinking and analysis can now be done with artificial intelligence. Instead of believing the American dream still exists as it once did, consider how it needs to be redefined to fit our current world. Story 40. Yes and no. I believe that part of the American dream is being independent enough that you do not have to rely on others for your own wealth. Originally, this meant opening your own business, owning your own home, and being debt-free. This was easily obtained before so many American corporations grew so large that profit was no longer an obstacle they had to worry about. Now, these corporations are so large that profit is a given. You can still become independently wealthy, of course, but it is a lot harder to do so if you are not franchising. After all, the vast majority of Americans are going to choose McDonald's over the mom-and-pop burger joint if they are stopping for a quick meal on a road trip. If you own a McDonald's franchise, you are more likely to be successful than if you open a local burger joint. Story 41. No, it is not corporate greed that has caused the cost of housing to explode. Meta, Google, and Microsoft are not the reasons houses cost over $1 million in my neighborhood. It is the current homeowners who have enacted various regulations that have made it impossible to build more housing. Rents and houses are expensive because of your millionaire baby boomer neighbors, not because of billionaires. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.